All right, it is time again for your life to be blessed like crazy. So happy that you're here, and I'm so happy about today's guest because Mandy Hale, she is incredible. She's best-selling author, speaker. She's founder of the social media movement, Single Woman. Now, hold up before you're thinking, oh, I'm not a single woman. Don't you go anywhere because this will apply to you. We're talking about relationships. We're talking about dating, how so much craziness has changed in this realm, and how, yes, even if you're not single, how to stay in that dating relationship with the person who you're with right now. So I'm so excited. Mandy, thank you for being here.
Thank you so much for having me.
Oh, it's going to be such a ride. I love this. I love talking with people who are out there and changing things and speaking up. And you're so doing that. Like, you're creating a movement. And
Yeah.
I love it that you're a believer and
Yes.
you're like, guys, there's like a fun way to do this. There's a smart way to do this. Like, don't believe everything that's out there, because it's funny, when I was looking over, you have so many books out. I was looking over your most recent one, Don't
Mhm.
Believe the Swipe. And it's like, oh my gosh, I never thought about that. Like, all of the relationships and dating stuff is written by men.
Yes.
Like,
Yeah.
tell me about that. How did you get started with this?
It's such an interesting phenomenon. I always, I'm a huge avid reader, and I go to the bookstore, not so much, not as often now since we're all dealing with COVID, but I still do go, and I'll put on my mask and, go to the bookstore. But you always see in the self-help aisles, you see nothing but women. And I'm like, are the men not wanting to self-help or what's going on here?
True.
But then you look at the titles, and a lot of the titles, especially dating and relationship and love books, are written by men. And so there's sort of this, it's like there's this divide. Like, okay, how do we reconcile this? Like, the women are reading the books, but the men are writing the books. So
Mm.
that's kind of where I decided, I think it's time to write a modern day dating book, written by a woman from a single woman's perspective. Because what's interesting, and I know you mentioned that a lot of your audience, is married, and actually a lot of my audience is married, because what's been so cool about my journey over the last decade or so is that the women that I started speaking into their lives from my social media platform when I was 30, they grew and changed and evolved along with me. And a lot of them have gotten married and had children, and they're still, reading my books and keeping, staying on my social media platforms and reading my blog and things like that. So it's been this really cool thing to, even though I haven't yet gotten married, a lot of the women whose lives I'm speaking into have.
Mhm.
And so it's been a really neat thing.
Yeah. So I really want to talk about how to date when you're married, because I
Yeah.
think that's going to help a lot of people. But before we get to the married people, let's talk to the ones who find themselves single, and maybe single for the first time in their lives. Because here's what I see happen. And as a life coach, I've seen such a trend in divorce with the rise in the pandemic. Like,
Right. Yeah.
divorce has, unfortunately, like, I've seen this in my clients. Like, I did not anticipate this. I thought we were going to be together the rest of our lives.
Right.
Like, I don't even know who I am apart from this relationship. And dating, please don't make me throw up. Like, I don't even know how to navigate those waters now, because so
Yeah.
much has changed. So what would you say to that person who's like, for the first time in their life, they're like, what do I do? Like, how do I put myself out there? Do I put myself out there? Do I like not, do I just believe that this part of my life is over, or what do I do right now?
Well, I think the interesting thing about the timing of my new book coming out, Don't Believe the Swipe, is that it's coming out as we're sort of nearing the end of this pandemic journey.
Yeah.
Hopefully, we're all
Yes.
praying.
Thank you,
And I feel
Jesus.
almost like we're like the groundhog, like coming out, and it's springtime, and it's time to, kind of start all over again with life and this new beginning. And so I think for people who have either, they've been like me and they've been, pretty strict about quarantining and staying away from other people, I've been on pretty much a year-long dating hiatus, and I think a lot of people are in those shoes, or maybe people who are coming off of a marriage or an engagement or a relationship. It is just like this whole brave new world out there. And that's exactly why I wanted to write this book, because it's all so confusing. And I'm still confused by it, and I'm out here doing it. So I think you've just got to really find a way to be true to yourself. I think number one, don't be scared of the new technologies, because I learned through my career, like my entire career and life changed on social media. So if God can take social media and transform my life and career and make me an author, then he can certainly take a dating app or an online, internet dating platform or whatever, and bring you your person or your true love, or maybe just like a really great friend. But I think that would be my number one piece of advice. You don't have to rush into anything, but certainly don't be afraid. There's no longer the stigma with dating apps and online dating that there was even 5 years ago. I mean, it's just the way that everybody's meeting. And sort of like a cool thing about the pandemic, if there is a cool thing about the pandemic, is that these dating apps have allowed people to, not me per se, but I've heard, friends who have connected with people in other states, that they're connecting long distance because they're not going to meet up in person right now anyway. So they're broadening their horizons and meeting people in different towns or states or parts of the country or even parts of the world. So I think definitely just stay open to the new way of doing things, because I think this is the trend, and this is only going to continue as we continue, even more towards the technologies that have brought us all together during the pandemic. I think that this is the new trend. This is the way people are meeting now. You're swiping right, you're swiping left, instead of shaking hands to meet someone.
Yeah.
So I think stay open, stay true to yourself. Definitely don't, I always recommend not overwhelming yourself with, 5 dating platforms at a time. I recommend one at a time, and do some research. And I talk about all this in the book, like kind of give some tips about how to figure out which platform is right for you, because there's a million different platforms out there. So do some research, talk to friends, see what other people recommend, go on there and kind of check out what's going on the app and how you feel about it, and if it feels like a good fit, and then give it a try, because you never know. I mean, you never know. I have a friend who got married a few months ago in the midst of the pandemic. She and her fiance, well, now husband, they were each other's first match on Bumble, and they ended up getting married. So, I mean, I certainly think happily ever after can come in a completely unexpected way, and it might just come from swiping right on the right one.
Yeah, that is so true. It's so funny because when you talked about like a stigma associated with it, I had a client one time, and she was, from what she said was like how they met. She had gotten married about 7 years previously, and it was her second marriage, and what I knew from her was that one of her clients was actually his son, and that's how they met and started talking. So when I mentioned that to her, she's like, "Oh, no, that's just our cover story. We met on Match.com." I'm like, "What are you doing? Are you serious? I'm like, why do you need a cover story?" She's like, "Yeah, that's just more interesting. But that was like 7 years ago. And so there was like this, oh, we met on a dating site. But now it's like, yeah, that's how everyone is, like, that's our social circle. That's where we hang out.
Yeah. I mean, this is just kind of like the way there's even apps now where you can, I know Bumble in particular, they have Bumble BFF, where you can connect and meet with friends and meet new girlfriends. And like, I've actually met a couple of really great friends from Bumble BFF. So this is just kind of the way that the world is going. And, once you get on there and you start doing it, it's actually kind of fun. I mean, it can be overwhelming, but then
What
at
do
the
you
same
do about
time,
that overwhelm?
say that
So
again.
let's say someone feels overwhelmed. They're like, where do I even start? Like, this makes me nervous. I don't know if this is the right thing. What would you say? Like, just do this. Like, before you go to bed tonight, just do this.
I mean, I would honestly say probably first and foremost, if you have some single girlfriends or single friends, even guy friends, kind of talk to them and kind of get some feedback, because chances are, at least one or two people who are on these apps.
Okay.
That kind of helped me, because when I was first, and I haven't done a ton of online dating, which is the great irony in me writing the book about online dating, because I haven't, I'm not one of these people who's been a serial online dater, I guess. So before I ever got on my first app, I started asking around, okay, do you recommend this app? Do you recommend that app? Tell me what's good about this one versus that one. And I got a lot of feedback. I reached out to a friend who I knew met her husband online and said, tell me how this went. Tell me what recommendations you have, what advice you have. So I think tapping into your inner circle and to the people around you, that definitely makes things less scary, because when I talk to people I trust and they recommend this app over that app, or they tell me this bad experience versus this good experience, it kind of gave me a starting point. Okay, here's where this friend started and they had a good experience, so I'm going to start here. And again, you don't have to rush into anything. I think first taking time to maybe just download the app and kind of start scrolling through and checking out and seeing what it's all about and familiarizing yourself with how it works and the people on there and, different things like that. I think setting up your profile is also a really great place to start. And I have a ton of advice in the new book about how to set up a profile. You can take your time with it, have fun with it. View this as like a new, exciting adventure that might end up with you meeting the man of your dreams, or it might just get you out of your shell a little bit. You might just meet a great new friend, or you might just learn something about yourself and put yourself out of your comfort zone a little bit, because that's really what it's all about ultimately. And that's really what the new book is all about. Like, ultimately finding a way to stay true to yourself and to discover, all these wonderful things about yourself, and maybe also find love in the process.
That sounds good. Okay, so now here's our single friends. They're like, all right, I'm gonna do it. I'm gonna set up an app. I'm gonna put myself out there again. And then comes the date.
Yes.
Like, how you're nervous, like what to expect. What is the dating game even like today? Like, what are you looking for? What do you think, as a believer, where does that affect our dating life?
I think that it's a good question. What does the dating life look like today? Because I think we're going to all kind of be figuring it out together, because it is going to be, post-pandemic world. What is this going to look like now? Where do we start? I think definitely, first and foremost, safety is the number one thing for me. What I always recommend to people, I have certain rules, like, okay, yes, you definitely need to know the person's first and last name before you agree to meet up with them in person. Don't be afraid to do a little online sleuthing to see, you want to make sure that this person is legit, that this person is, someone who you feel like you're safe with, that you can trust, that you feel okay about meeting up with. The whole internet stalking thing, it's not a bad thing when you're utilizing, these platforms to kind of make sure that the person that you're investing your time and energy in is someone who is worthy of that time and energy, and someone who is trustworthy. Because I tell a story in the book about the first time. This was literally this was a few years ago, my first date ever. Met up with a guy. I didn't even get this is how green I was. I didn't even get his last name before we went on the date. I mean, we met at a public restaurant, but met up with him, and we're talking, and I said, oh, by the way, what's your last name? And he started being, super sketchy and just weird about it. And I was like, okay, like when you're meeting a girl for the first time, you should probably just tell her your last name, unless you want her to think you're a serial killer. And then in that case, don't tell her your last name. So he just, well, if you really want to find out, you can. And there's ways to, and it was just this really very bizarre. So obviously I ended the date early, went home, I did find out his last name, and he was, by all appearances, normal and sane. And it wasn't a serial killer, but it's just one of those things, like, you want to
Yeah.
give the other person a comfort level. You want to make the other person feel safe. You want to know that you are meeting up with someone who is a legitimate person and not someone who, you're going to end up on an episode of Dateline, as one of my girlfriends says. So, yeah, I think safety first. Safety is always the number one thing. And I think you have to kind of go in to the process knowing what you're looking for and kind of have your standards and boundaries in place and be unwilling to compromise or settle. Because I think once we reach a certain age and we're, still single, we get the whole spiel about, well, you're more likely to be struck by lightning than to get married past the age of 40. And so everything that we're hearing is encouraging us to lower our standards and just latch on to the first person who comes along. And I'm not here for that at all. You have to kind of have an idea of what you're looking for and go into the process with that mindset. And I mean, certainly be willing to compromise on if he has blonde hair or brown or blue eyes or green. But the big things like, his beliefs and his character and his goals, his plans, his, all of those things, you should have a good idea of what you're looking for. And, certainly don't feel like you have to settle just because you're whatever age, fill in the blank.
I think that pressure can be so dangerous.
Yes.
Really. And that we see that in every area of our life is that should, like I should be married. I should be in a relationship. I should be thinner. I should be smarter. I should have more money. Like all the, I call it shoulding all over yourself.
Yes.
We have all those shoulds. And so if we could just let that go and realize, what if I can just be present right now? And what if I can like love myself right now? Because I think it's impossible to the goal of dating. If the goal of dating is to get in a relationship, to find that partner, to love that partner, to share your life with that partner, I don't think you can fully love that person until you can fully love yourself.
Absolutely.
And I think that's what a lot of people, that's the first work we have to do really, is to be able to love ourselves.
Right. For sure. And I think, again, it goes back to, I'm always trying to look for, what can we learn from this whole crazy past year? And I think a lot of us have had a lot of extra time on our hands to, a lot of people just weren't, maybe some people were out there, in the dating game, but I think most people were being, reserved and, not going out and mingling with tons of people at a time. So I think we've had this year of kind of hibernation, so to speak, to kind of hopefully do some work on ourselves. I know that's what I've been working on a lot, through therapy and just different things of learning more about myself over this last year, because I've spent a lot of time with myself over this last year. Basically dated myself over this last year. And that's the thing, though, if you haven't learned how to do that, if you haven't learned how to be okay in your own company and not just be okay, but to even love your own company, then you're probably not ready to be out there seeking out someone else. So I would encourage anyone who is still, you never, and I talk about this in the book, like you never want to use dating or relationships as an escape from yourself or from your life. It should be just this wonderful addition to your life, the cherry on top of the sundae, so to speak. It shouldn't be this place that you go to escape yourself. I think it all has to start. The relationship that you have here with yourself is going to be reflected in all of your relationships, romantic, friendship, otherwise. So it's really, really important. That's why I wanted the book to be called Finding Love Without Losing Yourself, because if you lose yourself and find love, what have you really gained?
Yeah. You gained the whole world, but you lost your soul in the process.
Right.
Like what's the point there? So let's talk about about our married friends. Okay.
Yeah.
Because I know sometimes, especially like we've been talking a lot about the pandemic and sometimes it's like, oh my gosh, I don't want to spend another day in this house with you. Like I'm just saying that because I'm a life coach and I have seen what is happening.
Right.
And a lot of times it's like for some reason my partner's getting on my nerves more than ever before. And it all comes from just that angst of being like, we're always together and what do we do? But I think about when we're first dating, like we have this heightened level of excitement. We're engaged. We're more attuned to the other person. And I noticed that like my husband and I have like a standard date night every single week. And
Yeah.
it's so easy to get comfortable in that. To be like,
Right.
oh, you want to go out to eat, and just shoot the breeze and whatever. But when we make it intentional, it's totally different. And so I want to talk about how do you bring this like dating excitement and this state of engagement
Right.
to people who their relationships and their marriages may are a little bit stagnant right now and they need like that a dose a little bit of that energy.
Right. I think a really cute, just fun, easy way. And, I do have a lot of probably, well, I have at least as many married friends as I do single friends. One of my friends that they really, her and her husband, that they really utilize as kind of like a fun way to keep things feeling like they're still dating is just the texting, like the text flirting and like you did when you first met. You sent these fun texts and you wanted to, kind of showcase your personality and your sense of humor and let the other person see, how great you were. So you really put a lot of effort into those conversations and the texting and the humor and the joking and the flirting. And so I think just starting with something as simple as that, just like the little text flirting and the winky faces and the gifts and all the fun things that you can do. I think just remembering to, for me, I've never been married, so I can't speak from that perspective. But I would think that, you know, you want to keep that up. You want to keep that going. You want to keep that feeling of newness and freshness and never, obviously you have to tend to, have the kids been fed? Does the car need gas?
Right.
You have to do all the day-to-day mundane things like we all do. I mean, I have to,
Right.
make sure the garbage is taken out and laundry is done and all those things here, even as a single person. But I think just taking the time to put that little extra effort and to treat that other person as if you had just met them, like as if you are still trying to impress them,
Yeah.
as if you are still putting your best foot forward. I think that it's not something you have to put a ton of brain power and energy and effort into. It's just the little simple things that I think that you can do
Yeah.
to really keep things fun and exciting.
That's funny. You said that and it made me think. So yesterday I got you are right here. You are a heart thumping hottie from my husband yesterday around
See, he's doing it
2:30. And
right.
so, I mean, here I am going through the day and he's going through the day and we do different things all day long. We're both working from home, but like, we're in different parts of the house and everything. And so I get this like this little
That's
text. I'm
so
like,
cute.
that's so sweet. You're a heart thumping hottie. But to know, and I think that's just
It
like it's
probably made
pretty,
you feel like you were, this blushing, in this brand new relationship again. Because when you read those
yeah.
kind of words, it's such a simple thing. It's a text message that takes 2 seconds to send, but you have just talking about it, you have a glowing look on your face. So just those little, I've always been about the little simple things, like bring me one rose instead of 2 dozen roses, and I
Yeah.
think it's just those little simple things that just take a moment or two out of your day that can just go so far.
Yeah, that's so true. That's so true. And we've been married like this December, we'll be married 30 years. But
What?
I know.
How are you even, that's not even, what? Did you get married at like age 5? I mean, how is that possible?
No, girl, I'm in my 50s.
What? Oh my gosh. That is
But that
crazy.
was just like those little things. And it's exactly what you said. It like comes down to those little things. And it just tells the other person, hey, you're on my mind. Like that's,
Yeah.
and so if we can just take that energy of like, you know what is the little thing I can do? Just a touch or a text or
Yeah.
a little, just an act of kindness. I mean, the other day, like I was so behind in everything I had to do around the house. And, he hung up my clothes in the closet. And I was like, that was just so, it was unnecessary and it was thoughtful. And so I think that's what, to add that energy, that dating energy to your
Right.
relationship, that's so important right now. But again, it
Yeah.
goes back to you've got to love yourself first. You've got to have that confidence. And like you said, like why get the love of your life and lose yourself? What's the point there?
Right. Yeah, exactly. And I think that it can be really easy to kind of get caught up. That's part of, this new modern technology dating world that we're living in. It can be easy to get caught up in letting yourself and your worth and the way you feel about yourself be defined by, who is swipe. That's why I wanted it to be called Don't Believe the Swipe. But I mean, that extends to really anyone. Like you can let the number of likes on social media that you get define
Yeah.
your worth. You can let, the number of people who text you in a day define your worth. I think the swipe is really anything, the broader, swipe is really anything that you're letting, external control how you feel about yourself on the inside.
That's so good. So good. This has been so helpful. Mandy, where does someone go to get more information about you, your single woman movement? Because again, a lot of people are finding themselves in that situation for the first time and would love a
Yeah.
little help navigating those waters.
Yes, absolutely. And I would say just always be super gracious with yourself because we're all new at this thing and we're all always learning in this whole crazy dating world. And again, post pandemic, it's probably going to be totally different than it was pre pandemic. So you can go to my website at mandyhale.com, or you can go to don'tbelievetheswipe.com if you would like to purchase the book. And I will say, I say this about all my books, but like I genuinely mean it with this. This is my favorite book that I've written. I think it's just the perfect time for a book like this because we've all been dealing with so many heavy, intense, dark, stressful things. And this book I was written before the pandemic. So it's like the antithesis to the pandemic. It's light, it's funny. I think you'll relate to it even if you are married. I tell funny dating stories. There's a chapter about Dolly Parton. I mean, good grief, who can't relate to Dolly Parton? She's a saint. So yeah, I hope that it just injects a lot of joy and humor and entertainment into people's lives that I feel like we all so desperately need right now after a very, very, challenging past year.
It's been a long winter, girl. It's time
It
for
has
some spring.
been. Yes.
Well, thank you so much, Mandy. I really appreciate this. And thanks for everyone
Thank
for
you.
tuning in and just adding that wonderful energy to whether you're dating or whether you're married. Just add that energy and love yourself first and be
Yes.
blessed like crazy.